Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what I think is my 45th live stream. An hour or so spent working in some corner of the Node-RED organization on some bit of code here, there, or anywhere. For those who are new to the stream, this is me working actually on the Node-RED code rather than spending time using Node-RED. So if you're interested in getting started developing stuff, then this stream is for you. In fact, the reason I know it's the 45th stream is I went and had a look back at the archive, so that if you're not familiar, the Twitch video goes up onto YouTube a short while after the stream ends, and there's a big playlist with them all there. And I did get asked the other day whether there's an index or just something to know what. There's a ton of content now. There's like 45 hours at least of content. So I'd always intended as I go to produce show notes or list. One sec. Oh, good. Quick action on the mute button. Yes, I'd always intended to do show notes, add somewhere a list of what's going on. But I never quite got around to doing it, and now I've got a backlog. So yes, I will be going back through and making a few notes on what's in each of the previous live streams and try and do a better job of keeping that up to date as we move forward. Because the whole point of this is a useful archive of how I develop stuff in Node-RED, and hopefully it's useful for you guys watching, and hopefully you guys can see some of the stuff of how I go about doing it. So just say hi to everyone in the chat. Jim Bob Squelchy, Noxy Boy, Uncle J84. Hi you all. Noxy Boy is asking, have we heard any news on FlowForge yet, other than the name, and it's something to do with Node-RED. So if you're not familiar, so FlowForge is my quote-unquote day job. It's my company. We are building something to complement and use with Node-RED. Is that best way of describing it? That's not really a great way of describing it. It's basically going to be a... I'm just trying to think of how we've described it. So it's going to be a platform for running Node-RED, to make it easy to manage multiple instances of Node-RED and to be able to build multi-user, multi-tenant type environments where you want each user to have their own Node-RED instance, or you want multiple users to collaborate on a set of Node-RED instances, that type of stuff. So that's in essence what FlowForge is about. It is going to be open source for the core of it, or technically source available. So no, in fact, a lot of the core of the code will be open source for people to use for personal use, if you like. And there will be certain aspects of it that are not, that it's source available, but it's not an open source license. So the code will be there, but it won't be licensed for any sort of commercial usage, because it's going to be a business, and that's going to be the model. We've got, things are happening. We're busy working on it. We've got a little way to go yet, but I certainly see it's going to be a really cool thing, both to complement Node-RED as part of the open source community, for individuals wanting to run multiple Node-RED instances, or maybe manage multiple Node-RED instances for their own use on a relatively small scale. There's going to be a lot of great stuff in there that complements Node-RED, gives more value. To also then people who are interested in running Node-RED more commercially, and that type of stuff. But anyway, this live stream is not about FlowForge. This live stream is about Node-RED. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about FlowForge stuff, which I don't. This stream isn't going to be about FlowForge, because that's a commercial thing outside of the core Node-RED project. So, Uncle J84, short off-topic question. Does anyone know why the catalog JSON does not get any updates since 2 days? Someone else asked a similar question, and I've not had a chance to go look. You know what? I suspect I know what that is, so I suspect we will fix that in a minute. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, off topic, but perfectly valid to ask, and we will fix that. So, what's the plan for tonight? Last couple of weeks, well, I was off last week, but last couple of streams we've been doing stuff around nrlint. Since our last stream, a couple of issues have been raised, so I thought we would just continue that theme and investigate some of these issues, hopefully have relatively straightforward fixes, and see how we get on. So, here we go. But before we do that, let's just quickly go and sort out the catalogue. So the way the catalogue is generated is we've got the flow library, flows.node-red.org, which runs a right, here's the flow library. Well, no, so we've got the flow library, which is backed by a big Mongo database. There's then a task that runs periodically. In fact, if I go, this is the, yeah. Sorry, I went to the wrong place to try and explain it. So we have the flow library, whose source code is here. In that we have a GitHub action, which every 30 minutes it runs this task, which what does it do? It essentially runs the generate catalog script that's part of this repository, injecting in the Mongo database connection. So it connects to the Mongo URL and generates the catalog. And what we do is we push back and update this repository, catalog.node-red.org. So if you can see 14,928 commits, and all of those commits are just the updated, updates to the flow library. And because it's a big JSON blob, it's not really meaningful to look at. But sure enough, you can see the last commit was 2 days ago. So that's interesting. Why has someone raised a pull request against the flow library? I hadn't spotted this. This has only come in. Oh, right. I'm getting distracted. Let's ignore this pull request against this. I should probably turn off all sorts of contributions on this repository because it's an automated one. So we have this action that runs every 30 minutes that does the work. However, and I got caught out of this before, if we look at this, if we don't do any activity in the repository, the flow library repository, for 60 days, GitHub disables the workflows because it's inactive. So the theory being, why keep running scheduled workflows if there's no development work going on, which is perfectly reasonable, and it catches us out because it means every 60 days, if we haven't pushed any fixes to the flow library, then the action gets disabled. So if I go to publish update catalog, it's not due to run for another 20 minutes, but if I click run workflow now, there we go. So that's now running, and in about, well, you can see all these previous ones take about 30 seconds. So if we click through publish update catalog, click into it, we can watch it run, sets up the node environment, runs the npm install to get the dependencies used by the script, and runs the update script. Done. It's that quick, and then checks back in to the catalog repository. So if I now refresh, you can see the last commit 2 days ago, refresh 16 seconds ago. So the catalog is now up to date and will refresh every 30 minutes. So there you go, Uncle J84. Problem solved. let's switch to what we should be doing. Well, Jim Bob Squatchy, the interesting thing is there is a valid point as have we got the action in the wrong repository? Because given the catalog is generated from the Mongo database, the catalog's not actually generated from any content in the Flow library repository. So it would be perfectly valid to move the generate action over to the catalog repository, which of course then is getting updated with commits every time there's an update. So it would keep itself alive. So yeah, that would keep it alive and allow us to keep ticking. But anyway, that's not what we're doing tonight. And I can see Uncle Jay's just posted to the Discourse forum. Thank you for doing that. Saves me a job for later. I have notifications all over the shop. So cool. So nrlint. So this is the lint tool, newly released. Hold on. Let's close that window. nrlint, the lint tool. I won't get into all the details of what it is. We'll see it in action in a sec. We've had a few issues raised, so we're going to have a quick whiz through. Can we knock some of those off the list? So to begin with, we just need to get our development environment set up. Here we have a terminal running Node-RED, or a terminal to run Node-RED. Here's a terminal in the nrlint repository. And I just, as ever, need to remind myself in the package.json, we have the script to build. And in fact, I think, hopefully, I have a nodemon command in my history that will watch, is it lib and source? Yes, so that's what we want. So this is going to watch for changes in the lint source tree, and whenever it detects them, it'll rebuild them. And for now, we'll just stick a run grunt dev over here. Noxboy asks in chat, is it possible to allow users to create their own snippet library for the Monaco editor? I don't know. I'm not as up to speed as to how the Monaco bits hang together. Steve from the community's done a lot of that work, so we need to he's done all that work. And to be honest, the focus has been just getting the editor integrated. There's a whole host of, okay, what about further customizations? And we haven't broached that. I'm sure Steve would be able to come up with a way to hack it in, but we haven't done the proper design work. So yeah, I don't have an answer for that at the moment. Right, so I've got Node-RED running. You can see there's a bunch of errors because of stuff I was investigating earlier. I just want to go tidy them up quickly by firing up. And let's just go find the unknown nodes. Oh, go away. Yeah, we need... delete that node, hit deploy, everyone's happy. Okay, so we've got the Flow library, nrlint. You can see all the exclamation marks for some of my nodes, and that's goodness. So with that, we've got some issues to look at. There is overzealous duplicate HTTP in detection. There is a false positive loop detection, which I'm interested in, and can't ignore too many nodes on flow. So yeah, these are the ones we're going to look at. I think to begin with, we might start what should be fairly straightforward, overzealous duplicate HTTP in detection. So what's this about? Right, so the duplicate HTTP in rule. Right, it's just, I've got so much rubbish in here now. I need to, is So each of these flows is me debugging something for someone at some point, and they all get a bit cluttered. So let's have an HTTP in node and an HTTP response node. And we're going to put the URL to be /hello. So that's good. So now let's duplicate that. And we get errors. So if we go look at the linter, now another requirement we've had is to be able to add some filtering to this list, because it would be nice just to very quickly just show me the errors or the warnings for the current tab. But we don't have that today, and that's a bit more involved than I want to get into tonight. But you can see down here we've got duplicate HTTP in URL for these two nodes, which is fair enough because it's absolutely right. They're the duplicate URL. The bug is if I change one of those to post, now semantically they are now different because it's different HTTP methods to the two URLs. However, it's still it still flags them as being duplicate. So that's the bug. We can do we just need to take into account the method property to before we declare something a duplicate. So we go into the nrlint repository under under lib rules, and in here we have no duplicate HTTP in URLs. So this is what a rule looks like. It exports an object with a metadata section and a create function. And create gets called whenever the linter wants to create an instance of this rule to run. And it gets passed in a context object, which is kind of its API handle for passing things back to the linter, and then the configuration. And that function is expected to return itself an object with, the way it works is it returns an object with, the property keys are, I forget what I call them internally. They are event names, and then a function that should be called when that event happens. So you can see here, when the start event happens, which means we are starting a new lint run, this function will clear out the cache of what paths it's seen. And end, which means we've finished passing over all the nodes, this will get called, and here is where it's then examining the seen paths, and if there's more than one of any given path, it reports the duplicate HTTP in URL with the ID. Now, there's actually a couple of improvements we can make here. So if we just switch back, let's not confuse matters. Let's put them both back to get, so they are genuinely identical. The fact I've got two entries here, well, that's okay. However, if those two flows weren't next to each other, if they were entirely different flows, it's feasible that those two lint reports wouldn't be next to each other. They would be anywhere in this list. What we can do, and actually what I got working after I got this rule, is you can see, for example, here, the loop detected, you can see it's actually reporting two nodes because there are two nodes in that loop. What we can do to begin with to improve this rule is, rather than report the duplicate for each node individually, we can report them as a group. So to do that, well, hold on, I've got ahead of myself. So let me just finish explaining how this rule is working, and then we'll make that enhancement. So I said we've got the start event handler, the end event handler, and then we register an event handler for type HTTP in. So this is saying for every HTTP in node in the flow configuration, call this function. So this is quite nice because you can also register for any node for any node, full stop, regardless of the type, or you can hone into just particular types. So it makes it sort of reduces the amount of boilerplate rules have to write to if they just wanted DHCP in. I don't have to. The other approach would be to have a node event, and then in the function I'd have to check, oh, is it an HTTP in node? Is it not? This just looks a bit nicer, I think. So what this is doing is, if the node, it looks at the node's configuration, and if it has a URL property set, then it updates the scene paths object for that URL value to be an array, and it just adds the node ID to that array. Which is why when we come to the end, we can look at the lengths of those arrays, and if there's ever more than a length of 1, it means 2 nodes have that URL. Now, I realize I'm not fixing the bug at this stage, but what I'm going to do is, down here where we say the scene path length is greater than 1, the current code then iterates over each of those and does a report for each one. What we're going to do to begin with is just do the one report, and for location we pass in, rather than the array of just one ID, we can pass in that array of all of those IDs. Okay, so that's saved, so it's running the build in the background, and because it does Webpack it takes a little while, so we just twiddle our thumbs, and there we are. And I don't have to restart Node-RED because of the way it works. I'm just going to hit deploy so I don't have to recreate this. So now when I refresh and it reloads the linter rule, it's still flagging them both up because they are duplicates, fair enough. Now when I go to the list, and I imagine it's going to be lower down, so here we have, now we just have the one duplicate HTTP in URL, and it's showing both nodes. And I can click on either node to go to it. So that's now quite nice. If these were in completely different flows, I would have just the one entry there, and I would be able to click and find the corresponding entries from this one error, which is nice. So now let's fix the actual bug, which is if I change that to post, I'm going to hit deploy just so I can reload and have that predefined. So you can see it's still claiming they're a duplicate. What we're going to do is, it's super simple. We are going to prepend the URL, because we build up this list of the scene paths. Well, we can just add the method as a prefix to the URL as the key to that scene paths. So if we just export the node JSON, you can see we want method is the property we care about. So node.config.method, and let's just, well, so at that point I'm going to do it like this. Build up the key. And stick it in all of those. Okay. And just for completeness, because these are no longer URLs, we'll call it key down here as well. Yeah. So let's save that and give it a chance to rebuild. Yep. So now when we refresh, we don't get any lint errors on these guys. And just to make sure I haven't broken it, let's create a duplicate, and yeah, those guys are now highlighted as duplicates. And if I create a duplicate of that one, so we now have two lint warnings, one for the pair of get nodes and one for the pair of post nodes. Neat. Okay, let's just check through the original bug report. To implement REST API, I must use HTTP nodes with the same URL but different methods. The linter continues to be a problem. Cool. I was just double checking there wasn't any other aspect to it that we'd missed, but no, I think we have got it. All right. Now, one quick thought. Bear with me. Yeah, so something we don't have set up for this repo at all is a test framework. So actually testing these scenarios, that's a problem. Not going to fix it right now. Some technical debt to worry about another time. But let us, whilst we're here, I just hit save on an empty file, so it's just rebuilding. Let's just get the issue number 19. There we are. So kill that, and then let's commit these changes. So consider method property so also displays single warning for all duplicate nodes. There we go. So we'll just commit and push that and then move on to the next one. There we are, issue fixed, and we're only 30 minutes in. So let's look what's next on the list. Can't ignore too many nodes on flow. Okay, so with a flow with lots of nodes, and I get the too many nodes on flow warning as expected. Good. Hover over the error and clicking the drop down button gives the option to ignore for node or ignore for flow, but neither of them silences the warning. Expected behavior, the warning should be silenced. That's entirely reasonable. Let us, right, first things first, I'm going to turn off some of these, excuse me, I'm going to turn off all of those, and I'm going to set max flow size to 20. Okay, so yeah, we actually need to sort out the formatting of some of these error messages, because we've also got to sort out internationalization so that if you're running in a non-English locale, we're able to display it. But you can see, you know, these flows all suffer from breaking this lint rule. So let's go to flow 1, may as well, and do the drop down. Now there's a bug fix, which is ignore for node shouldn't be enabled because the selected entity isn't a node. You can see we've disabled ignore for group correctly, and ignore for flow. So if we if I open up the flow, you can see its description box is empty. Okay, so if I do ignore for flow and open it up, its description is still empty. And there is the bug. Okay, so let me just bring align to grid back on just for just for argument's sake. And this is where I would love to have now an option to filter on the current tab, because I'm looking for, there must be, let's just move this node off the grid. Let's see, can I find him in this list? There he is. There, he flashed by. So if on this one I say ignore for flow, what that actually does is it edits the description of the flow and it adds this special comment. So this is just like nrlint, if you're familiar with nrlint in the JavaScript world. It adds in a comment, nrlint, the rule name, and turns it off. So that's what should be happening. But now if I go and turn off align to grid just to... So for flow 1, when I do ignore for flow, I go in and you can see it's not added the too many nodes rule. And so this is all wrapped up. It's the same similar bug of why does it still say ignore for node when we're not talking about node. The logic is expecting this thing to be a node. So when I say ignore for flow, it's looking at the flow of the node that the lint error is for. But in this instance, the lint error is not for a node, it's for a flow, so the logic has to be slightly different. Okay, so at this point, we're not mucking around with the rules, we are actually going into the linter plugin, so that's down in source, source nrlint core.html. So this is the source code of the lint sidebar. And I should be able to go and find ignore for. And here we go. So this is where it builds up that menu, the drop-down menu. And you can see ignore for node, ignore for group, ignore for flow. So we've got two things to fix. First up, we need to make sure we disable the ignore for node option if the thing we're ignoring is a flow. If the entity we're ignoring it against is a flow. So first, I want to find, we've got logic to deal with toggling. Yeah, all right, so here we've got logic which toggles those three options. And right now, we haven't got any logic dealing with, we haven't got any logic. At the moment, we've only got logic that scans through, and if anything of the... So item.location is the list of IDs of the things the lint error is against. So here we iterate through all those IDs, we go and get it if it's a node, and if the node has got a G property, which means it's in a group, then we don't disable the group disable for group option because we've got something in a group. What we also need to do now is add some extra logic to say, actually, is the thing we're in a flow? Yeah. Now it's going to be slightly odd because technically this list of locations could be a mix of flows and nodes, which is kind of well, none of the rules we've got do that mixture. They either report against a node or a list of nodes, or they report against a flow. So I'm not going to worry too much at this stage about dealing with what if there's a mixture of flows and nodes. So I'm just going to change this logic slightly. So if obj exists here, it means we've got a node. And then as a second check, if that has got a G property, then we can disable. We don't disable the group option. But putting an else here means the ID we're looking at isn't a node. So now we can say obj is red dot workspace. What is it? Red dot workspaces dot red dot nodes dot workspace, and then the ID. So if obj, then we're going to say node option disabled is true, group option disabled is true, although it should already be true. In fact, yeah, the default is what you can see up there. So here we're just going to change any that need changing from the default. Okay, so if any of the locations are a flow or workspace in the term we use internally in the code from 13 years ago, or however long ago it is I started on Node-RED. Yeah, so if anything is a tab, a flow, a workspace, then we will disable the disable for node option. Good. Now, when we actually look in the logic for the ignore for flow code, here you can see when you trigger that menu option, again it iterates over all the locations, it gets the node, it then gets the flow or the subflow that node is on. If that exists, then it does the work to disable and updates the history, so you can Control Z undo that. What we want to do is something slightly different. So yeah, okay, couple of potential bugs. What we want is, ultimately we want to identify the flow we want to be working on. And yeah, we want to identify the flow that we want to disable it on. We'll do some work to identify the flow, and then by the time we get down here, if we've identified it, we'll disable it. So to begin with, we can say we do this, in which we say, okay, well, first let's assume the ID is a node, so we'll get the node. If it's a node, then we'll set the flow to either the tab or the subflow that node is on. But if it's not a node we recognize, then we can say, let's try and actually the subflow case is an interesting one. Subflows are always presenting interesting edge cases to think about. Yeah, I'm going to say at this point, let's guess that ID could be the ID of the tab or the ID of the subflow. Just tidy that up. Cool. Right, so now flow. Yeah. Yes, that's going to do the right thing. It'll get the right flow object. And then if by the time we get down here, if flow is defined, it does the work. So I do want to come down to this bit of logic we just did. And just as above, I think the logic is sound. Again, if it's an error reported against a subflow template, then it doesn't make sense to have the node option disabled. Yeah, I think that's good. Right, so I've just hit save and that's not running. So we run the build. So just wait for that to run. And now because we're modifying the sidebar content, we do have to restart Node-RED to load those changes. So just a quick save of one of the core source files is enough to kick it. So now let us reload. Okay, and we go to the linter. Too many nodes on flow. All good. That's on flow 1. So now when I do the menu, you can see ignore for node is disabled. That worked. If I do ignore for flow, it's disappeared from the list. And if I edit, you can see max flow size is off. So it's worked. Awesome. And if, just to show you, if I were to come in here and disable that, well, change that comment, you can see that error has popped back up because it's no longer being ignored for this flow. Good. So that's working. Whilst we're mucking around with this particular rule, something I'm interested in is if I, yeah, okay. So again, this, I think this is related to what I looked at in the previous stream. Philosophically, should we care that there are too many nodes on a disabled flow? Now, interesting. Right. So here is the work I did on the last stream, and I haven't merged it and I haven't got it locally. Okay, I'm not going to go down that route. I need to get that merged, and we need to get that released, but I thought I already had that locally, but I don't. It's in a different branch and I'm on the main branch here, so yeah. Well, that's the point. Yeah, I pushed. Didn't think of that. Made a bad habit. I pushed directly to the repository just now to fix that previous issue. It should have been a pull request done via branch. But anyway, point being, I'm not going to worry now about the disabled, this edge case of should that rule lint on that tab, because we've already done the work to add an option here to turn on or off linting disabled flows. So yeah, that work is done. That work is done. So right, so this is now issue number 15. Oh, don't restart Node-RED. I want to restart this window. And this is allow a flow scoped warning to be disabled for that flow. Yeah, makes sense. Fixes, did I say 15? Yes, issue 15. So those who aren't perhaps familiar with GitHub, it's, if you're fixing an issue, it's always good, if in the second line of the commit message, you put something like fixes 15 or maybe closes 15, just I use fixes, then GitHub spots that when I push that commit to the main branch, GitHub spots that message and it will automatically close the issue. So it's a good habit to get into because it gets all the sort of cross references right. And again, I'm just going to push without doing it via pull request. There, and you can see closed just pinged, and if I scroll down, not already closed this in this commit. And is that commit. Good, good. So 2 down. Number 3. So we had some issues with the original loop detection that was getting some false positives. So if I go find, I think that is what one of my existing tabs worries itself about. Maybe. Yeah, this tab. So this was me testing a bunch of scenarios, and we were getting some false positives. But I was going to say, but as you can see, but you can't see because I ought to turn on no loops. So you can see down here, it does detect a loop in this bottom case, but that's perfectly valid because the message can come out this bottom port, in here, out here, back up to the switch, and that is a loop. So that's a genuine hit. And the original version of this rule was getting hits on, I forget which, I think it would get confused when you had multiple outputs. And I think for both these top two cases, it would think they were loops. Anyway, I completely rewrote the loop detection code, literally went back to my university textbooks about detecting cycles in directed acyclic graphs, and yeah, all good. But here we have an example flow that does claim for the latest version of nrlint is getting a false positive. So let's import this flow. 10 configure. I do wish when people share flows they would give us a slightly cleaner starting point. But having said that, this code is not detecting any loops. Yeah, no loops detected. If I were to do that and that, it does detect some loops. And you can see it highlights them all. But the flow as provided does not detect any loops. So, yeah, I think so you can see, yeah. See, I don't think they're running the latest version of the linter here because two reasons. The current version of the linter, as you saw, when it detects a loop, well, sorry, the original version of this lint rule, when it detected a loop, it would only identify one node in the loop. Just the way it worked. We didn't keep track, or yeah, we couldn't efficiently then list all the nodes in the loop. The fixed version, a side effect of the fixed version is we are able to identify all of the nodes in the loop. Now, this screenshot, the fact it's only highlighting one node rather than multiple nodes means to me, I'm pretty certain this is not running the latest version of the loop detection code. Now, it's entirely possible. Let's just go check. Because we did lots, with all the 2.0 releases last week, a couple of weeks ago. 102 is the latest, and okay, so 102 is the latest release. 5 commits to master since this release. Let's look at what those 5 commits are. And the very first one is improve no loop detection. Okay, so it's a valid issue, but it is one that was already fixed. And we just haven't released the code. Awesome. But that's good. That means I can go in and say, oh my, GitHub has got slightly confused. It's showing me the diff. Yeah, the way they reload the page, they're showing me the diff whenever I change view. Right, let's just do a hard refresh. That's better. Yeah, so what we can do is we can a duplicate of 12. This will be fixed in 1.03. Awesome. And then, yeah, this last issue is a bit of internal housekeeping. There's nothing for us to do on that. It's an upstream issue we're sort of waiting for. Now, we did have this pull request from Tamura-san, who's did the original implementation of nrlint. Okay, so there's some issues with... So the default lint we create, the default config we create for the ESLinting of function nodes, I thought we could just do ESLint recommended, which is what you do in the config file. But according to Tamura-san, that doesn't get parsed properly, so it ends up being this huge blob, which I think that's okay. I suspect there's more work to be done to allow finer grained customization of this, but so he does that, but then he's also added, he's added the proper wrapper to the function code, so it is actually linted more closely to what the code looks like. So that certain variables like node are defined and these things are all defined. Cool. Well, that all looks good to me. We can merge that. Let's go look at... So the other pull request was the work I did on the stream a couple of weeks ago. I really did bare minimum commentary, which isn't like me. But this is where we added the option to be able to lint disabled flows and turn that on and off. I think we were happy with that. There was a follow-up bit I wanted to look at whether linting disabled nodes made sense, but I don't think it did. So let's just merge this in now. Delete that branch, tidy up your old branches. Cool. So if I do a git pull, just to pull down all that goodness, and run a build. Good. And then just hit that to refresh. Right, cancel that, reload that. Pull up the linter. Yeah, so we've now got the lint disabled flows option present, which is goodness. If I do max flow size, turn off no loops, we get all of those, and flow 2, oops. So flow 2 has got too many nodes. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Is it interesting? So let's set that to true. And then disable that. Okay, that isn't changing. I was expecting, well, if we're not going to lint a disabled flow, then we shouldn't be getting the too many nodes error on flow 2 like we are. Just to check, if I misalign this node off the grid, and of course I've got all these. What I am looking for, needle in the haystack, but Yeah. Okay, here's how to look at it. So you can see I've got 29 warnings. If I pull this up and enable linting disabled flows, it goes up to 30, and sure enough you can see the error. So there is still a bug here. Or, this linting disabled flows option isn't working because, well, it's working for not linting nodes in the flow, but it's not stopping us linting the flow itself. Okay, good job I pulled this down, because this is a bug to go have a quick look at. What we need to do is just remind ourselves how that option was working. So in linter.js, lint disabled flows is the variable, and then we come down to walking. Right. Okay, I'm there. I can step you through it. So we go into the core of the linter. So lib linter. So here you can see the lint disabled flows flag, which we do set to true by default, but you can disable via the editor. And then all the way down here, which is where we walk through everything in the flow configuration. We're about to look at an object, and we say, if we don't want to lint disabled flows and the Z property of the current object, Z being the identifier of the flow a node is on. So we are looking at an object with a Z property, and our list of disabled flows includes Z, then return, as in don't dispatch the linters for that flow. So that works great for nodes on the flow. But what we're still doing though is we're still dispatching the flow handler for that disabled flow. So here's the logic for, we are visiting a flow object, and here you can see is where we build up our list of our set of which ones are actually disabled, which gets used later when we start visiting the nodes on that flow. But what we need here is not only if obj is disabled, if not lint disabled flows, then at this point we want to I think we want to return, yeah. So we visited a flow, it's disabled, and we're not in the business of linting disabled flows, so we return, which stops us dispatching the flow event, stops dispatching the well, no, we wouldn't do that anyway, because that's not relevant. But here you can see this corresponds to what I was showing you earlier about the different event types, the start event, the end event. Here you can see that's where we invoke that start event, and here you can see we dispatch an event for each type of object, config node, and for objects which have a subtype like a function node, change node. That's where we dispatch, and then we dispatch the end event down there. It's a very nice architecture. I'm very pleased the design of this. It feels elegant, is what it feels. Anyway, that has built in the background. It's the core linter, so I don't need to restart Node-RED. It gets loaded independently. So now when I reload, let's just double check what rules I've got. I'll turn off align to grid just to reduce the noise. Max flow size and lint disabled flows is not enabled. And how many nodes? Lint max flow size 10. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now we've got 14, and no new warning has popped up for flow 2. But if I go and enable lint disabled flows, instantly you can now see I've got 7 where I had 6 before, and you can see flow 2 is on the list. Cool. So that's working. Yep, that's working. And you know what? I think we're going to pretty much leave it whilst we're ahead. We're going to just throw this change up. Do not dispatch flow event when for disabled flows when, what's the variable called? Do not dispatch flow event for disabled flows when, yeah. Just aesthetically, that commit message is slightly too long. Do not send event for disabled flows when disabled flows is not set. Let's be a bit, is false because it's, yeah. Cool. And there we have it. That's tonight's live stream. There's no live stream next week. You get another week off. I've got another week away with the family. So, what would be the proper way to update the linter? Uncle Jay asks in the chat. Do I have to rerun the command npx nrlint in it? To be honest with you, Uncle Jay, I'm not entirely sure we've got that workflow figured out cleanly, because we've only really done, we've not done multiple big upgrading releases of the linter. To be frank, it would be worth rerunning the npx nrlint init command, sticking it into another file, and then compare the differences. And it might just be obvious what new stuff you want to copy over, if anything. But I think that's a workflow we will have to refine as we just get a bit more experience of how often do we change configurations, how often are we adding new rules, that type of stuff, and what's the right default behaviors. If an nrlint file doesn't mention one of the core rules, I think at the moment you'll get the default configuration for that rule. So yeah, it's going to be one of those things we will have to refine and improve the experience over based on all your feedback. So, but there we are. So like I said, no live stream next week. I'll be back in 2 weeks. And let me think. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I then have another week off, and then we're back. Kids back at school. Normal service will be resumed without interruption for a few weeks. So thank you for joining. Thanks for joining the chat. Always good to have you guys there. Do leave a message in the comments if you'd like to on the YouTube archive. I will endeavour to get a searchable, useful list of what all the different live streams have covered up. May even try and get the descriptions of each one on YouTube. At least have a basic description in there. But there we go. Have fun. Take care. I will see you when I see you, which will be in 2 weeks' time. But otherwise, do stop by the forum, do stop by Slack, come say hi. If there's anything specific you'd like to see in these live streams, then do let us know. Always happy to try and accommodate. Like I say, we're in this odd time of immediately after 2.0, not charging into new development work in the core of Node-RED. nrlint is at the moment has been a bit of a rich seam of things to do. There's a bunch of other stuff we could be doing, so just shout, and always happy to try and cover what's useful for you guys. Otherwise, I'm off. So, good night, and see you again soon.